It's a me, Wario Bros. Z. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, is the 5th entry into the Mad Max movie franchise. And I'm gonna be honest, I've only seen one of these movies, which was Fury Road, and that was 9 years ago. Which, the only thing I remember about that movie is a vague memory of cool desert car battles and a bunch of psychos that look like Quan Chi found fentanyl. Basically, I don't remember anything about this movie franchise. So that means you're about to get the opinion of a knuckle-dragging, mouth-breathing, scum-sucking homunculus known as General Audiences. That's right, I'm the guy that walks into Avengers Endgame without watching any of the first 20 movies because I can't be bothered, and I do be thinking Spider-Man's pretty cool. Alright, enough waiting around. Let's actually dive into the review, and don't worry, it's gonna be spoiler-free. Here we go! The story centers around Furiosa, detailing her journey from little girl to all the events that would one day lead her to becoming the ultimate badass she is in Fury Road. She lives her life peacefully with her sister in Australia, or I guess as peacefully as you can live in Australia. One day, a bunch of raiders come and wind up kidnapping her, bringing her back to Dementus, the main villain of the movie played by Chris Hemsworth. By the way, can we talk about how weird these names are? I get Dementus is the main villain, so that kind of works. But then you have this little girl living in this perfect utopia oasis, and her name is actually Furiosa. That would be like having a baby boy and saying, "Ah yes, what a beautiful baby boy. I will name him Brutalitimi." Anyway, Furiosa's mother tries to mount a rescue, not only to save her daughter, but also because if anyone found out they were living in a thriving oasis, it would be invaded and destroyed. You can kinda see where this is going, right? Let's just say Furiosa gets the Bruce Wayne special and she dedicates the rest of her life to becoming Vengeance and the Knight. From there, there's not really a ton of plot that happens. It's a pretty straightforward and simple revenge story. Furiosa is basically spending most of the time trying to stay alive in this crazy world, going from one action scene to the next. And the setup for each of those action scenes is basically, hey, we need to get from point A to point B. So I'm just gonna start the car and calmly start driving. Now don't get me wrong, I love the action in this movie. It's nothing but fast cars, explosions, and bullets flying all over the place. And once it gets going, it's pretty much all gas, no brakes. In fact, there's one road battle that I think clocks in at like 20 minutes of non-stop action. No matter how many people they kill, more just spawn out of thin air. Literally, goons descend onto the battlefield in air gliders made out of string, duct tape, and a dream. And it is the coolest, most metal thing on the planet. This shit is crazy. Frog. There was actually one part of the shootout that I thought was really funny, where Furiosa lands in the passenger seat of that giant oil tanker truck thing, and she's staring at the driver named Jack, but neither of them say anything to each other, so they're just kind of like... Director George Miller really knows how to make car battles and desert shootouts feel fun and bombastic at all times. The cinematography is slick and the sound design is incredible. You could feel every headshot, explosion, and bodies crunching under the weight of the giant tires. I saw this movie in IMAX theaters and wow, it is absolutely worth the price of admission. Mostly, what is up with these New York prices? I will say though, this movie definitely has some issues with visual distinction. Since 99% of this movie takes place in an open desert during the day, it all kinda starts to blend together at a certain point. I couldn't tell if it was a new location or if we were somewhere completely new. I think what also doesn't help is that everyone kind of looks the same. It's all just endless, nameless goons fighting each other that all look like Junkrat fused with Star Wars sand people. And fentanyl. If it wasn't for the fact that the Quan Chi gang looks so visually distinct, I would have no clue who was fighting who. No idea who the good guys or the bad guys are. Well, I guess this movie doesn't really have good guys. Everyone except for Furiosa and Jack are pretty awful. But speaking of bad guys, Chris Hemsworth does a pretty fantastic job as Dementus. He is just oozing charisma, and you can tell he's really having a lot of fun with it the entire time. I also really like the visual storytelling they do with his outfit. When we first meet Dementus, he's wearing a pure white cloak and he treats Furiosa with kindness and compassion, even if he was about to Batman her parents a few scenes later. Later on, his cloak gets dyed red. He calls himself Dementus the Red, and he starts to act more violently. Finally, by the end of the movie, his cloak is black, red, and white, and he calls himself Dark Dementus. The cloak represents his current unraveling mental state, or perhaps it's meant to represent his true colors, rather than the charismatic leader he portrays to his men. It would be easy to write him off as some selfish, sadistic psycho, and he definitely is, but I think there's more to his character than that. This becomes the most evident at the final confrontation of this movie. Speaking of, I mentioned before that there isn't really a ton of plot in this movie, and that's really because people aren't really talking to each other, at least not about anything substantial. For like 2 hours of this movie, most of the dialogue is just However, in the final confrontation, there's a pretty substantial dialogue between Furiosa and Dementus. I wish I can go into more details, but it basically gives a pretty interesting insight into Dementus' character and perfectly parallels what was happening with Furiosa and her actions. It's honestly one of my favorite moments in the entire movie, and I kind of wish we had more character-driven moments like that rather than pure action all the time. As far as Furiosa the character, he's fine. There's honestly not much to her outside of the stoic, angry badass. In fact, she spends like 70% of the movie completely mute, only communicating with body language and Anya Taylor-Joy's gigantic, beautiful eyes. And even then, Anya Taylor-Joy only shows up halfway through the movie. The first hour, we follow Furiosa as a baby child. Although, I will say, since this movie is supposed to be a prequel, I really don't think Anya Taylor-Joy looks anything like Charlize Theron. Furiosa is also very reminiscent of action movie stars from the 80s. Not a lot of character, but just cool the whole way through. Also, this bitch had cheat codes turned on or something because every time Furiosa fired a gun, she was landing a headshot without fail every single time. It was crazy. Frog. Also, for a movie called Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, there is no Mad Max in this movie. Okay, he does make a small cameo in the movie, but other than that, nothing. I get that the franchise is called Mad Max, but it's like making a movie called Born to Shit, Forced to Wipe, a John Wick saga, and the movie does open with John Wick doing this. And then after that, he is completely absent from the rest of the movie. It's kind of weird. But I get they couldn't call it the Wasteland Saga or something like that because nobody would know it was a Mad Max movie. And then there would be no brand synergy, God forbid. But nitpicking aside, I think this movie is a ton of fun. There's a lot to like here, and I'm sure if I had seen the previous movies, I would be wojacking all over the little details and references that probably went over my head as a filthy general audience member. All in all, I strongly recommend this movie. Definitely go watch it in IMAX. But what do you guys think of the movie? Do you agree with me? Disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you liked my review and you want to see more, click right here, and remember,
have a rotten day!